somebody wanted to hear about the Climate Action Council. Erin, what did you want to know about the Climate Action Council?
Nothing in like particular is like dinging in my head. I was just interested in like how you got into it, and just if there's like any updates, because I know that I think Our Climate was doing, and New Yorker News is like doing some like work around the Climate Action Committee, and
Yeah.
I just was wondering, I haven't really been keeping up with if there's any updates on what the Climate Action Committee is doing.
All right, cool. I mean, and actually, I'm happy to just like answer that, and then is that okay, Kelly? I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
So I feel like the story of this is that some folks on this call know, and most do, that New Yorker News and Push Buffalo and advocates managed to pass through the nation's most ambitious climate law that has the only kinds of justice provisions that exist in the country. And one of those pieces is what I call like energy justice, which is this process and procedural element that if we're going to have this plan, to get to net zero by 2050 across our entire economy, that not only shouldn't we shouldn't develop a plan without more people involved to have a say in it, but that we should develop a process so that we can engage stakeholders to get as much input as possible from the plan. Now, it's not perfect, but what the law did was create a Climate Action Council, which is made up of agency heads and the administration for the most part, appointees. I was appointed by leader Andrew Stewart Cousins. I'm actually Beeman from Westchester. I've lived in her district for 20 years. And our task is to create the plan that will ultimately get us to, will be turned into regulations, but will the plan of how the state will get to these aggressive goals. And as part of that, there's several working groups that have been impaneled, and that's probably the update. There's so many of them, I won't even name. I'll leave a link in the chat where you can go online and see the list of them. You can also register to get updates on meetings, etc. So I think the latest update is that just a couple weeks ago, the state actually impaneled it. So there are 90 stakeholders that are involved in this process. And it's a lot, and it's people we know and like, some people we don't know, some people we don't like. But it is very strong representation from New Yorker News and allies in these groups. So that I think is the latest update. Rachel's like, Raya, I have questions. Any news on the CCIA? Just do, I guess not everybody on the call will know about that, but yes, there's news on the CCIA. So New Yorker News were really the architects of the climate law, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act that was passed last year. So the idea was, okay, we've got this climate law. How do we all pay for doing all of this? First, we got the framework, right? But if we're really gonna do this, we need to pay for it, and we need to get people put back to work. We need jobs in clean energy and all types of things so we can make this just transition happen. So the idea was, let's have the CCIA, the Climate and Community Investment Act, which puts a fee on pollution and raises up to $10 billion a year to get the type of jobs programs that we need. So the update is that we have been working on revising the CCIA. There are new elements to it that reflect some of what's been going on, expanding the program so that it pays for childcare, because how can you work if you don't have childcare? Expanding it so that we can make sure we get clean and renewable energy programs and co-educational opportunities on schools. Making it so we make sure none of these funds go to the police or jail infrastructure. So there have been some changes and updates. Look out for more of more about that soon, and more opportunities there actually right now in terms of lobbying, et cetera, and getting involved in it.
Also, so Daphne has joined us. So Daphne, do you want to just do a quick intro of yourself, your pronouns, and your org, and just maybe something about yourself?
Hey, my apologies for being late. I had a call with folks that I really shouldn't have had, and it ran over. My name is Daphne Rose Sanchez, she, her pronouns. I am the Executive Director of Kinetic Communities Consulting, and born and raised New Yorker, born and raised Brooklynite specifically. I work in the intersection of energy and housing. And I have the pleasure to know Kelly through Raya, and I've had the absolute pleasure and admiration of Raya for the longest, as she is one of the leading women of color in this space. So I thank her. I thank her for creating a pathway for people like me to continue working.
Oh man, that's fancy stuff right there.
Seriously, if you guys don't know, Raya has been one of the first women of color in this space before any of us that I know were around. And the issue of energy efficiency is not only the structural inequalities that exist in the built environment, but there's some very real structural racism within organizations. And so Raya, Raya paid the pass so that a lot of us don't have to come in with pushing our way in. So thank you.
I so hope so. And and I guess this is kind of free flowing, and Kelly, please step in at any point. But it's funny, to the extent I'll share my story, I don't do it very often, but here we are. Like, I want people to know, like, I didn't go to law school till I was in my 30s. I was a single mother. I had a 4-year-old. And yet, we did these things, and what good in the world didn't happen because a woman of color did it? That's all I have to say. And with that, yes, that's all. That's very good stuff. Anywho, Kelly, back to you. Does anyone else have a question or something they'd like to share about?
Also, you're absolutely fine. Like, I think it's super important that when we're in these spaces, we share these kinds of things, because this is the whole reason I like having spaces like this. Is when I was in college, I went to a networking event, and it was when I was in like the worst part of my college experience, where I was just like, I just want to drop out. Like, I hate this so much. Like, I should have just become like an electrician, because I should have just gone to trade school. Like, I'd like it so much more. And then I went to this one networking event, and it was about like women in the workplace. And this one woman, she said something that just changed my outlook on everything, where she was just like, it doesn't matter how you get there, just that you get there. She was like, I always thought that in order to be successful, you had to get like A's and everything else. She was like, I had C's throughout my entire college experience. I moved on to start my own business, and now I'm rich, and like, look at me now. So I think it's super important where we like share these stories of like the struggle.
It's real. It's very real. Because you know what's so real is that I'm sure all of you have seen that cartoon drawing that shows like an iceberg, and it's like just the tip of the iceberg. It's like somebody's success, overnight fame, and like recognition. And like what you don't see is like, the majority of it that's under the water of the iceberg. There's just, it's real. So anywho, just share. And the struggle is real. We all have our ups and downs. To everything there is a season. And if we can come together and get to know each other a little bit, I truly believe that the only way we're gonna I'm not, everybody on this call I'm sure agrees, but make the change is by actually literally getting together and doing it together.
I have a couple questions, Ryan. And answer these in whatever order.
I'm a Prince mega fan. Any other? Sorry, Rachel. I do know Rachel, which is why.
So first, I feel like I know you, but like don't really quite know like all of the different things you've done in this space. So could you just like give a background on like, I don't know, what you've done career-wise and everything, how you ended up on the Climate Action Council in particular? And then like question 2 is about like, how can we or others support you in your position as a Climate Action Council member? Because if I'm not mistaken, you're the only woman of color on the like Climate Action Council itself. And so I feel like that speaks volumes. And I know like women of color don't get asked this very often, but like, how can we support you directly in that role? Because it's quite a powerful position to leverage. And I feel like we should set up a community of support to make sure that it's happening. because I guess I'm just saying that because of how often women's voices in particular and women of color's voices get trampled, you know, in these spaces. So with all of that, yeah, those questions.
I say that I think that's a really, really helpful and supportive, and hopefully our people in Denver and Ohio can can vibe with the topic, even if we're being specific to New York, in terms of, you know, I think part of the answer, Rachel, is that like, I welcome your insights. You know, one of the things about being kind of like the only is like, I'm sure a lot of you guys have sat around too. It's like, everyone's like, find a mentor, find a mentor. And it's like, yes, in a perfect world, there'd be like some like benevolent, other than Lord above, some benevolent entity that could guide you, tell you how to do things. And sometimes that's just not there and you're trying to figure it out. And so insights and perspectives to me is like golden, like, because, you know, one, I could be doing A, B, C, and D, and you could tap my shoulder and be like, Ryan, I don't know if you realize you could be doing X. And I'd be like, wow. So I would say that connecting on it and trying to connect on it regularly would is like the first thing I can think of, like, to get people's thoughts, honest impression, and feedback as we, like, you know, get to know each other. How I ended up. It took a whole entire Black woman to rise to lead the whole entire state of New York, okay, in order for a whole entire overqualified sister like myself to get onto the Climate Action Council. And that's my real honest and true answer. Leader Andrea Stewart Cousins is an amazing force of nature. I'm so glad that she is one of our leaders in the state of New York. I have been living in her district for 20 years. Before I became a lawyer, I did community-based work, some in Yonkers. But of course, as some folks, you know, you may not have read my bio, but, you know, I did practice energy and utility law, specialized in energy regulation. I did energy advocacy, clean energy advocacy as a lawyer for a number of organizations in New York, in California, in Illinois. I moved to Hawaii, did it there for 3 years. Back in New York, I have a lot of experience doing clean energy advocacy and energy law and policy. So it kind of, you know, to have Leader Cousins, I'm active locally, and me and my peeps, my local peeps, went to our reps and said, Miss Raya should be the one. And Ms. Stewart Cousins said, okay. And that's how that happened.
I think that's so important, Raya. What you just mentioned is like collective power, right? Like, how do we build, you know, as Dana's mentioning, mentorship, but more importantly, how do we lift each other up so that we collectively are moving forward, and we're seeing an opportunity and saying, this is an opportunity for Raya, for Kelly, for David and Dana and Natalie, and understanding that it's not I, but we. My kind of question to you is, the energy sector and true community power is often at opposite ends. So a lot of folks in the energy industry really don't care about climate change. They care about the amount of money they're going to make, right? So as someone that juggles being, you know, a coordinator and advocacy folks, and then this position at the COCPA, what are kind of some strategies of lifting other people up or ensuring that frontline communities aren't being left behind? That's a long question.
It's important comments in it, and to go all the way back to the beginning, because to Rachel's question, like, how did it took, you know, one of my local peeps, Henry Hoffman, a Quaker, to, you know, we drove together to the New York Renews die-in last year, you know, and then, you know, me and my local activist peoples, and it was Henry who said, there's this council, Raya should be on that council. That's Raya. And I was like, me? He was like, yeah, you're perfect. And he was the one who was like, Iris, Jen, it's Raya. We got to go talk to Shelley Mayer like tomorrow because it's her. And he was and I was still kind of like, okay, really? And then I was like, yeah, you're right. It should be. So I'm just getting kind of granular and being very, just open this evening about, yeah, it took just somebody saying, this is something for this person. She's perfect. Let's get behind her and make that happen for her, for all of us. And that's really how it happened on that level. So that's real. It's interesting because I was on another panel today, and it was about people, customers as stakeholders, and they had someone from NRG Energy Sustainability area, and you'd have thought that the energy company was like the number one like environmental advocate, like from what they were saying, like the greenwashing is getting out of control. And they have an interest in the system being like it's always been. That's 100% true. And it is against their business model for communities to have power, and that's exactly right. And you're like, what are the ways? But there's a lot. I think a lot of it, we are in a situation, and I'll stop after I say this, I've been talking for a minute, where, we have the CLCPA has a lot of things in it. No other state in the nation has these things. It has, specific, they're supposed to be tracking how they manage to implement community-owned renewables, but we have to hold them accountable, and we have to really jump up and advocate in these spaces for the money that's supposed to come to our communities via the law, and then the other projects that are supposed to follow. So in a way, we got work to do in New York State.
So I think one of the questions that I've always wanted to know, because I also know you from a lot of different spaces, but we'd never really get to have time during the work to ask the personal questions. So one of my questions is just, why did you choose environmental policy over other forms of policy?
All right, it looks like we got somebody coming on, Olga.
Shout out to my mom.
Hey! Kelly's like, hey, Mom. That's an excellent question. I think I knew I was it's funny, you think, I actually get to ask this question a lot, and you think that, but what I'll say is that certainly when I was, trying to figure out what type of advocacy I was going to do when I went to law school, I was like, wow, what type of advocacy am I going to do? And I realized, once those opportunities started getting clearer, that there was hopefully a clean energy revolution coming. And I saw, like many of us, I'm sure, saw how completely linked that was to geopolitics, in particular oil. And I just found myself very interested. And energy in particular, if you're interested in economics or technology, it can, energy policy can be a really good place for that. And then the more I started learning about that and getting involved in that and doing advocacy and started digging, and I'm sure a lot of people on this call will share this story, and started learning more about climate change, climate justice, environmental injustice, environmental racism, and what that really meant in terms of the complete existential threat and destruction of first, it just seems like, and this is going to be in a joke way, but I mean it from my heart, we didn't go through a whole entire slavery and getting free and going through a whole entire everything so that all of our islands, all of our places, all of our cultures could be completely obliterated. I was like, that's not cool in any way, shape, or form. And just feel this big, and that's why I do a lot of storytelling, and I have YouTube things and different things I do, because it's just want to feel a passion to communicate to us, to our people, to care about this and why, and not have other people speak for us.
Thank you.
Running around like Cassandra, from the Greek myth. Her gift was to tell the future, and then nobody was going to believe her. Run her around. Mess.
And then
Okay, can I? So
Yeah.
I think I feel a little bit like I wandered into, I'm sort of underqualified here, but one of our big talking points is heat islands and just making people aware of heat islands. It's like a community readiness model. So if people are just, oh, well, I didn't know what that was. I mean, when we do a baseline study, it's just to assess if people even know what a heat island is. And you know, we're just looking, we're not even looking at the energy infrastructure, but a heat island obviously costs everybody a lot more money. And how do heat islands take place? You know, the New York Times just had that big article about redlining, how redlining led to heat islands that we have now. And so I guess, you know, it's like people avoid places because of climate change, but they're not even aware of it. So that's kind of like my battle is finding out why do you avoid this intersection? It's so hot and traffic's bad, yada, yada. But then when you actually take a mobile sensor out there and find out it's 109 degrees at 3 o'clock when kids are crossing that intersection, that's when parents and people start to get motivated. But it's almost like people are feeling these things. It's like the boiling the frog, and they're not even knowing they should speak up, or they feel like, well, here they come with their asphalt again. We're powerless. So
That's so, it's so interesting because we're both, I feel like, talking about like just wanting and here, you know, like running around like Cassandra with your temperature gauges. And it makes me wonder, like John and Azalea, like our media people here, like, you know, like what are you guys interested in storytelling in this area? I'm guessing, yeah, because I feel like we need to come together with folks like you so that we can, would you agree, Dana, get this, you know, we kind of need to get this realizations going.
Right. I mean, I took pictures of our trial climate relay, and like one guy shows up on his bike and he's got his kids in one of these carriers in a trailer, and they just went out and they like measured temperature. I'm like, just don't forget you got your kids back there. They got out there like, we had fun, we're citizen scientists. And I'm like, okay.
All right,
so, there's a group here called Taking Root, and they, you know, they sponsor tree plantings to get you your trees. And their big idea is just, hey, you know, kids don't see trees being planted when they live in an urban. You know, when I grew up, my dad had the nurseryman come out and plant some trees, and I can see those trees now. They're very big. So
you know, that's very,
it's like even having kids have exposure to this stuff, it gives them awareness that it's important. It's like a way of citizenship that's like completely, what I found is we have all these engineers and software engineers and stuff, and it was like finally something that they could do where they weren't picking up trash. They could actually, you know, get their sensor and pair it to the Android and like, you know, figure out how to use it and talk with each other. And they're talking about it.
I totally agree. Like that experiential, there's so many opportunities to learn and get these messages out. But Erin has a CCIA question. Let's see what she got to ask.
Well, I feel like it's kind of like not relevant at the moment. So if you want to continue,
ask your question. May as well ask your question. And I know, because Kelly, I don't know how long we have before we go to breakouts. I don't want to, anything else you want to?
Yeah, do we want to go to break at 7? Does that work for everybody? I'll take your silence as compliance. So at 7, we'll go on a 10-minute break. So go ahead and ask your question, Erin.
Okay. So I know a little about the CCIA, but like from just from like the talk, but I work with a group called the New York Youth Climate Leaders, and just kind of like something we've been discussing in terms of the CCIA is the fear that there won't be like a lockbox on the funds, and that they might be able to get out and not go to where they're supposed to be going, which could completely like take the whole bill apart. So I was wondering what's being done about that, like right now. You said the bill is being revised, so.
Yes, and this is, I will speak to this, and it's a, again, so it's a bit of a technical question about legislation, but and it really, it's an existential issue with the way that governments work. You know, the legislature has the power to make appropriations. They make appropriations every year. They can pass a law. If they decide they want to take it back, they can take it back. So here we are trying to have a polluter fee because we want the polluters to pay so that we can have these jobs programs to clean up environmental justice communities and give people jobs. Why? Because they're the ones who caused the problem, right? So maybe we should have them help actually clean up and, you know, solve the asthma clusters, etc. And we've got this multi-year plan to do it. So it's like $10 billion a year. So we want to make sure, that's a huge amount of money, right? And what is there anything else in this world that gets legislators more excited than a big pot of money to do things that they want to do? Absolutely not. You know, so we do get that there's like $10 billion a year. How do we stop the legislature from chipping away at it, diverting it? Look at how, like, the lottery, right? That was supposed to pay for schools. But by the time they got so excited about the lottery and managed to creatively cut around it, it doesn't actually give incremental money to schools. And to a certain extent, there's to a certain extent, you can't do anything about that. Like, to a certain extent, the legislature has the power. They could pass the CCI this year, they could repeal it 2 years from now, you know, so in a certain respect, we're kind of dealing with that. And we do want to figure out what are the ways that what can we do to do the most to make sure that those funds go towards doing what they want them to do and continue that way. And one of them actually is one of the people on this call has been developing an idea so that we have like a central authority like the MTA, you know, that would get these funds to administer it. That's one way. You know, can we centralize it? How much can we make these streams dedicated so that they don't get diverted? So there are things that we can do to maximize that, but existentially, we can't, you know, the legislature has the power to appropriate, you know, if there are ways that they can chip away at that money, and that's real.
All right, well, we probably have time for one more quick question if anybody wants to be. David, I saw your hand. Go ahead, David.
Thanks. I'm only a little familiar with the CCIA. However, there was a Sustainable Business Roundtable Summit today. I don't know how many people were on that, but one of your co-committee members, Dennis Selzenbeck, was on it. And he seems like a pretty smart dude. And he was talking about, or part of the conversation was about how incentives might work instead of penalize. Well, maybe not instead of penalizing, but that there's, you know, a combination of carrot, stick, and carrot to get some of these things going. And while I thought it was a brilliant thing to start with instead of just penalizing, because you want it to be a positive system, right? Not a negative per se. But I thought about it, I'm like, well, fossil fuels have been getting a ton of benefits over the years. If we incentivize it, do we risk that? So I'm just wondering, you know, the carrot and the stick portion of things, how and if you're looking at those things holistically.
I think, well, the issue of subsidies to the fossil fuel industry is one of the most important pieces, you know, worldwide, in terms of the billions and billions and billions of dollars that they get to pad out their bottom lines, that we need to not let go that way anymore. So there's that piece in terms of the subsidies. And, I think also though, I think I'll be honest about it, that, it is a kind of subsidy. Some of the incentive programs we've had, say, for rooftop solar have been a subsidy for the rooftop solar industry, benefiting, and, look, I've been a clean energy advocate, mostly benefiting wealthy homeowners, let's be real. But it's made it so that that industry can get on its feet. And the idea, at least in New York, was that in terms of the amount of money that the state puts into subsidizing the energy rate for solar customers, people who install solar owners, and that the idea is that rate will go down as time goes by, as the industry gets up on its feet. But I think it's fair to think of that as a subsidy of a kind as well. And the idea of, say, for utilities, incentives for performance, like performance-based rate making is one thing we talk about, in terms of like, how can we incentivize, say, the utility to want to embrace distributed energy, because it's against their business model, but can we incentivize them? Say, you can get an income stream if you do a great job of clearing your interconnection queue. So without going too far into it, you're exactly right though, because we try and set up these schemes, right? And they're imperfect. They can potentially be wasteful. They can end up being a windfall for the very actors that, we want to behave better. Like we want the utility to support more clean energy, not less. We want the utility to support more energy efficiency, not less. And if we end up having the opposite result and they pocket the money, that's not a good thing. So I don't know if I've talked a lot. I've talked from a few different corners of the world of incentives. I don't know if that was helpful, but I agree that one person's incentive is another person's market manipulation, is another person's windfall.
Can I just say something really quick? Because my advocate brain just is going crazy right now. New York State has a couple bills that would eliminate those tax expenditures that fossil fuel industries are getting. And it's in the chat, the bill number. One of the best things you can do is to call up your senator or like assembly member and say, please co-sponsor this bill. This is incredibly important. And the idea of I love that question, because I think it's something that like environmentalists don't necessarily always think about, like incentives and stuff like that. And that's honest. But the other thing is that like, they have been benefiting for all this time, and then not to like fearmonger or whatever, but we really only have but so much time, And so I think the carrot and stick works when you're training someone, right? But we're not training them. We don't have time to train them. They need to